Well, good morning and welcome on this chilly Sunday morning. It is sunny. It is sunny and the wind's not too bad yet. So, anyway, this is the Unitarian Universalist Church in Idaho Falls. I am Annette Lovell. I am your worship associate today, and we are bringing the service today with Reverend Kevin Carson and our media tech, Vic Allen, who we are very happy, especially that he is here. So normally I do a welcome when we all come on Sunday morning, but last night I noticed on the order of service the UUCIF mission statement, and I thought I cannot think of a better welcome than to read those words that I had not seen for a while. We honor the individual's right to religious and spiritual freedom, minister to each other and the community at large, nurture the search for truth and meaning, be a loving and intergenerational community welcoming to all beliefs, races, sexual orientations, ethnicities, and gender identities. Improve the quality of life by living our values and working for local and universal justice. So in this vein, I don't think anything else really needs to be said. We welcome everyone, and we're good to have you all here. As always, we'd like to start our time together with a few announcements, and there are actually very, very few. So first of all, I'd like to say if you're online, if you're in the chat, please put your note in the chat box so we know you're here. On a cold day like this, I hope we have quite a few people online that decided not to come in and brave the roads in the cold. And also, especially if you are home, joys and concerns, if you put them in the chat box, we will get them off of there here a little bit later in the service. And if you are in the sanctuary, the slips of paper on the back by the greeters table that you can also do your joys and concerns, and we will grab them later. Are there any other announcements? Yes, we have a couple. Molly.
Sorry, I should have gotten this to you earlier, but I just wanted to announce that we are going to have women's group next Friday, the 1st, and it'll be at Cindy Logan's, and it should come out in the update on Wednesday.
Okay, women's group Friday night, for all those that didn't hear, at Cindy Logan's home.
And it's anybody who identifies as female or as non-binary.
Everyone heard that? No, absolutely. Any other announcements? Very good. We will prepare for worship with a few moments to just settle in, calm our minds and our breathing. Let's breathe together deeply, listening to one another, and I will ring the peace bowl 3 times. So every week we covenant together. It helps us remember to live certain principal ideas. So please recite with me the covenant that you will find in your order of service, and then we will light our chalice. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And our chalice lighting was written by Annie Forrester. She says, "Come we now out of the darkness of our unknowing and the dusk of our dreaming. Come we now from far places. Come we now into the twilight of our awakening and the reflection of our gathering. Come we now all together. We bring, unilluminated, our dark caves of doubting. We seek, unbedazzled, the clear light of understanding. May the spark of our joining kindle our resolve, brighten our spirits, reflect our love, and unshadow our days. Come we now, let us enter the dawning."
Good morning. Our call to worship this morning is the poem, "My Work is Loving the World" by Mary Oliver. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums, here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. To Phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing since all ingredients are here, which is gratitude to be given a mind and a heart and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to this sleepy, dug-up clam, telling them all over and over how it is that we live forever. I invite you now to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 347, "Gather the Spirit."
Gather in sympathy I taught first grade for at least 6 years. You know, when you get this old, you forget time. And I love picture books. And I found a whole new section in the library about Elmer, who is a multicolored elephant, and he has adventures with different animals. So I found this. I was on the floor of the library reading these books for quite some time. So this is Elmer, just so you get his multiculturalism, many-colored. Elmer, the patchwork elephant, was having a friendly chat with Lion and Tiger when 3 angry elephants came by. "Elmer," said one, "the hippos have come to live here." "Tell them to go, Elmer," said the second. "There isn't room for them and us." "What if they don't want to go?" asked Elmer. "Tell them we'll make them," said the third elephant. Said Elmer. "Let me talk to them." You want to be careful of angry elephants. "Hello, hippos," said Elmer. "Hello, Elmer," said the hippos. "Elmer," said one, "we know we're not wanted here, but our river has dried up, and we have to have a river." "Make yourself at home," said Elmer. "I'll speak to the elephants." Elmer told the elephants about the hippo's problem. "Imagine if our river dried up," he said. The elephants agreed to let the hippos stay, but grumbled because the river would be crowded. "I'll take a look at their river," said Elmer. So you can see the elephants in the forest and the hippos enjoying the water. The hippo's river was completely dry. "Strange," thought Elmer. "I wonder what happened." And he set off along the dry riverbed. At last he came to some cliffs. The gap where the river had normally flowed was blocked by a pile of rocks. "The rocks fell and stopped the river," a bird said. "Move the rocks and the river will flow again," thought Elmer, "but that means a lot of work." On his way home, Elmer visited his cousin Wilbur. "Come on, Wilbur," he said. "I need your help." You'll see that Wilbur is just a black and white kind of elephant. "Good," said the elephants when they heard the news. "The hippos can move the rocks, get their river back, and go home." It will take them ages, said Wilbur. They don't have trunks. Still, they can stay here and use our river. An elephant said, but if we help, it will soon be done. Right, said Elmer. Get a good night's sleep, a good breakfast, and we'll start early in the morning. The next morning, Elmer called the hippos. Come on, we're going to get your river back. Are you feeling strong? The elephants and the hippos were soon bragging about how strong they were as they marched along. When they saw the rocks, the bragging stopped, and they set to work, pushing and pulling the rocks from the gap. As the pile became smaller, the elephants and the hippos all became dustier. I'd love a nice dip in the river now, said an elephant. Keep working, and you'll soon be able to, laughed Elmer. Hard work moving rocks. Sometime later, a hippo shouted, "Water!" as the first trickle came through the rocks. Careful, said Wilbur, it will come with a rush. And it did. The water suddenly poured through, pushing the last of the rocks out of the way. There's two cute little elephants with their trunks entwined. It must be a little love affair of sorts. Cheering and laughing, they all plunged into the river and forgot their tiredness as they washed off the dust and played in the water. When they finally parted, the hippos thanked the elephants and said, "Come and visit us any time." "You too," said the elephants, "any time." Later, Elmer said, "You were all pretty friendly with the hippos in the end." "Of course," said an elephant. "Besides, imagine if our river dried up." The end.
As we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return.
So it's our times for joys and concerns. We've got a few nice positive ones, but let's start. I think they're all positive. Let's start with one that we got via email. Unless, Vic, would you like to say it yourself? This is from Vic Allen.
Yeah, I wanted to thank the UUCIF care team, and especially my friend Ron here, who made multiple trips across town on my behalf, including bringing some meds from my home that were not available anywhere else on this side of the state, some that were pretty critical to my ongoing renal treatment. Anyway, to Ron particularly this time, and to the care team in general for all their help they offer all of us.
The care team has been invaluable the past few years. We do appreciate them. Thank you. Pam Lilburn, want to just say welcome back, Rhonda. So good to see you. And also welcome back, Olivia and Adam. Judy Stanley says, we should beat the negativity and bring in the light. I'll agree with that one. Victoria says that the snow is lovely. Yes, it causes difficulty, but it makes the world beautiful. And it does bring our water, which we have to always keep in mind. And Bambi has a joy. It's been a long journey trying to find a new name that feels like it fits. I am happy that I have found one, but it is difficult from how I originally introduced myself. I would like to go by Siren from now on. So let's all try to remember that. Welcome, Siren. Yeah. And I'd like to light a candle of, I think, joy. My granddaughter, a couple weeks ago, I was out with having dinner, and she's 17, and she came out to me, kind of. I say came out, but yet she really didn't. We were having a conversation, and she just started talking about the fact she had just broken up with her girlfriend, and we started talking about relationships and how difficult they are. And not once did she think like that was a strange thing to be talking about. And I love that. I love the fact that my granddaughter knew that she was in a safe place. She didn't need to give any explanations. It was just, Grandma, I've got a girlfriend. Cool. So I think we're doing something right, even though we do plenty of things wrong too. So joy for that. And Kevin has one more he would like to share.
After all that joy, I hate to bring it down a notch, but I wanted to share some concerns I had about the current epidemic of gun violence and mass killings that is plaguing America right now. When I last checked, there have been at least 39 mass shootings so far in just the first month of this year. And it wouldn't surprise me if the number has grown even higher. I think there may have been one last night, in fact, in Los Angeles, as I recall. This is an obscene problem that is unique to America because of our irrational love of guns beyond even the most basic common sense reforms. We simply must do something to end this violence. I have always supported the right to own guns for sporting purposes and even for those whose fear of the world makes them want to keep a firearm for protection. But the proliferation of assault weapons and semi-automatic pistols and our lack of enforceable laws to prevent guns from making it easier to commit mass murder simply must change. It's hard to imagine that the current Congress will do anything about it, but I pray we will come to our senses someday soon. It is just difficult to turn on the news every day and see the latest mass killing, and it's just been absurd this month and frankly obscene. So I wanted to raise it up this morning and lit a candle for that. Thank you.
And we light one more candle for all of those joys, concerns, and sorrows which we choose not to share with today. Oh, I'm sorry, Vic, was there anything in the chat box? Okay, thank you.
Our reading this morning is from the book The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming by David Wallace Wells. It is worse, much worse than you think. The slowness of climate change is a fairy tale, perhaps as pernicious as the one that says it isn't happening at all, and comes to us bundled with several others in an anthology of comforting delusions that global warming is an Arctic saga unfolding remotely, that it is strictly a matter of sea level and coastlines, not an enveloping crisis sparing no place and leaving no life undeformed, that it is a crisis of the natural world, not the human one, that those two are distinct and that we live today somehow outside of or beyond, or at the very least defended against nature, not inescapably within and literally overwhelmed by it. That wealth can be a shield against the ravages of warming. That the burning of fossil fuels is the price for continuing economic growth. That growth and the technology it produces will allow us to engineer our way out of environmental disaster. That there is any analog to the scale or scope of this threat in the long span of human history that might give us confidence in staring it down. None of this is true. But let's begin with the speed of change. The Earth has experienced 5 mass extinctions before the one we are living through now, each so complete a wiping of the fossil record that it functioned as an evolutionary reset, the planet's phylogenetic tree first expanding, then collapsing at intervals like a lung. The most notorious was 250 million years ago. It began when carbon dioxide warmed the planet by 5 degrees Celsius, accelerated when that warming triggered the release of methane, another greenhouse gas, and ended with all but a sliver of life on Earth dead. We are currently adding carbon to the atmosphere at a considerably faster rate. By most estimates, at least 10 times faster. An offering to support the mission of this church will now be given and gratefully received. Before I start my sermon, I want to mention that Today I have to leave, unfortunately, right after the service, so I won't be around to talk about it afterwards, but just hold any questions or thoughts you had till next Sunday, and I'll be glad to. My wife got called into work, and I have to run home to be on dog duty this afternoon, so that's where I'll be going. I wasn't here on January 1st for the traditional burning bowl ritual we celebrate that encourages us to let go of old negativity, pain, and burdens of the past. But if I had been, one burden I might have chosen to discard would be any remaining hope I harbored that the world would awaken to the biosphere level catastrophe of climate change unfolding around us and the associated crisis of a sixth mass extinction, and find the cooperative will to do anything substantial to reverse course. More and more in recent years, I've come to share the sentiments of people like Michael Dowd, who once tried to educate the public and advocated for action to reduce carbon emissions enough to make a difference, but who now suggests there is not only very little we can do to avoid catastrophe, but that the seeds of the catastrophe are planted in the foundations of modern civilization in the first place. I've joined the ranks of those who recognize that climate change is no longer a singular, solvable problem, but an entangled set of crises that surpass any reasonable solution. And the best we can hope for is to mitigate a complete catastrophe for the biosphere. Paul Chifurka, who writes from a Buddhist perspective, calls this realization of our current global predicament climbing the ladder of awareness, which he describes as a 5-step process from being dead asleep to, quote, awareness that the predicament encompasses all aspects of life, including everything we do, how we do it, our relationships with each other, as well as our treatment of the rest of the biosphere and the physical planet. Chifurka and Dowd are among many voices, now urging us to change our thinking and adjust to a new post-doom perspective. Most of the ideas I'll talk about this morning can be explored in more depth at the website postdoom.com, including some very good videos recorded by Michael Dowd and a host of other notable thinkers. We have known about the looming crisis for decades, but did nothing. Most of the damage, in fact, has occurred since the end of World War II, about 85% of the carbon in our atmosphere. It would be insincere to blame it on our ancestors and the Industrial Revolution, though they played a part. As David Wallace Wells puts it, the planet brought from seeming stability to the brink of catastrophe in the years between a baptism or bar mitzvah and a funeral. If the world had listened to the climate scientists a few decades ago and taken the crisis seriously, we might have avoided some of the worst consequences. And it is not only humans impacted, of course. The populations of many animal and plant species are already decimated, and many others are going extinct at a rate far faster than would be expected. Our entire biosphere, the interdependent web of all existence, is impacted. This is simply the reality we face, and it is now more appropriate to speak of climate resilience than reversing course on climate change. We have already crossed several tipping points and have reached the point of no return. We are already beginning to experience the impacts. We will need to find ways to live with this new reality. And maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to avoid the worst case scenarios. So back to the burning bowl. I realize the idea of abandoning hope for preserving a comfortable and sustainable planet may seem a bit troubling or even shocking to coming from a Unitarian Universalist minister, especially from someone who is on the board of the UU Ministry for Earth. Hope seems fundamental to the practical efforts of our religion after all? Aren't we supposed to be advocates for changing the world and making a difference? If I thought it would make a difference on climate change, I would become a street corner prophet, parading around in a sandwich board that proclaimed, "Repent to stop climate change. The end is near." But despite all our efforts from climate activists, the dire warnings of climate scientists, and the United Nations conferences on climate change, the so-called COP conferences, which brought together world leaders, climate activists, corporate interests, and celebrities for decades to announce goals and targets to reduce our carbon emissions and stop the warming, nothing substantial has ever come to pass. As the activist Greta Thunberg commented so succinctly about the most recent COP27 conference, blah, blah, blah. This was the 27th such conference since the first one in Berlin in 1995. These UN conferences have become a great stage upon which various actors can strut and fret their hour in front of the world without accomplishing much of anything. There are simply too many competing interests involved, coupled with denialism, and too much money at stake to reach any binding agreement among nations that might avert catastrophe. As they say, there is too much time spent rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. But does this mean we're just doomed and should give up and descend into despair? After all, just this past week, the famous doomsday clock of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists was advanced to 90 seconds before midnight, the closest to midnight, signifying certain global catastrophe it has ever been since it was created in 1947 as a warning to the world. The clock used to be primarily a reflection of concerns about the threat of nuclear war, but in recent years, the climate crisis has become a substantial factor. The bulletin cited the climate crisis and the anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, along with the breakdown of institutional norms and biological threats like COVID-19 as the reason for the alarming move to 90 seconds until midnight. Though the clock reflects more opinion than science, it is a useful acknowledgement that things right now are looking pretty bleak to everyone who isn't deluded by what Michael Dowd calls hopium. Dowd describes hopium as a comforting vision of the future that requires breaking the laws of physics, biology, or ecology, such as thinking that we can now slow, stop, or reverse the great acceleration of biospheric collapse. Hopium is especially dangerous to one's mental and emotional health because while it reliably provides short-term relief without early treatment, it even more reliably is followed by long-term grief and occasionally even severe depression when reality inevitably bites. But even more importantly, unless millions of us can break the hopium habit, I fear we will not have the collective will to do what we need to avoid being evil on a geological scale, i.e., by failing to ensure as few nuclear meltdowns as possible and assisting as many tree species as possible to pass through this bottleneck. The reality of our situation is summed up nicely by what Dowd calls 10 collapse-related inevitabilities as we stumble into a future of ecological and societal certainties that most people cannot see and cannot see or will vehemently deny. These are: 1, most people will have a hard time trusting how and why our civilization is collapsing. 2, abrupt climate change locks in biospheric collapse and extinctions. 3, tipping points already crossed will be falsely framed as still avoidable. 4, without assisted migration, love in action as he calls it, most tree species will go extinct. 5, without urgent collective action, there will be dozens of nuclear meltdowns. 6, As our biospheric and societal predicament worsens, so will our mental health. 7, most people will only reluctantly relinquish their faith in the almighty we. 8, if you proselytize only the doom side of collapse, expect to be shunned. 9, most people will crave distraction and virtually anything that offers hope. And 10, elite universities, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, mainstream media, politicians, and best-selling authors will remain first-rate legal hopium dealers. Now, some of Dowd's 10 inevitabilities may be debatable, but I think they generally offer a fair assessment of what we are witnessing already. We are living in a time that is uniquely challenging for our physical, mental, and spiritual health, and even the overall health of the biosphere. No human beings have ever faced the combination of challenges that confront us. Being forced to adapt will be a rough and anxiety-filled journey for generations. The American Psychology Association already recognizes eco-anxiety as, quote, the chronic fear of environmental cataclysm that comes from observing the seemingly irrevocable impact of climate change and the associated concern for one's future and that of the next generation. So what, then, is the alternative to either dwelling on the doom and giving up when reality bites, or dosing ourselves with enough hopium to deny what is clearly happening in the world, or drowning ourselves in denial and a grotesque consumerism run amok? Michael Dowd's website has 3 characteristics that define a post-doom mindset which can point a way forward. The first is, what opens up when we remember who we are and how we got here? Accept the inevitable, honor our grief, and prioritize what is pro-future and soul-nourishing. This characteristic is rooted in understanding our interdependent connection to the web of all existence and embracing the great story of the evolution of life, warts and all. It acknowledges the history of the mass extinctions that have gone before us and the fact that our species would not be here without the biological upheaval they produced. At the same time, it is good to honor our grief and sense of loss as we feel this deep connection to other forms of life. For years, Joanna Macy and others have promoted voicing and honoring our grief for the harm we have done to the earth as the first step to living a more meaningful life in harmony with the web of life. It opens us to be able to prioritize what is pro-future and soul-nourishing in our daily lives and in our advocacy work that calls to us, how we can participate in the healing of the world. The second characteristic Dowd identifies is a fierce and fearless reverence for life and expansive gratitude, even in the midst of abrupt climate mayhem and the runaway collapse of societal harmony, the health of the biosphere, and business as usual. I think a fierce and fearless reverence for life and expansive gratitude would be a great motto for our Unitarian Universalist faith. I think about how Albert Schweitzer described the foundation of his morality as reverence for life. Holding fast to this fundamental ideal of reverence for life, despite bearing witness to climate-related disasters and the loss of biodiversity, is the key to understanding a post-doom worldview. The third characteristic is living meaningfully, compassionately, and courageously no matter what. This characteristic brings to mind a lyric for one of my favorite UU hymns: just as long as I have breath, I will answer yes to life. having the courage to live thoughtfully and compassionately, no matter what, to say yes to life, is the essence of what we must confront once we awaken to the reality of our unfolding dilemma. We know it won't be easy. To quote another lyric from an old American folk song, I know dark clouds will hover o'er me. I know my path is rough and steep. Nevertheless, we must dig deep within and find the courage to continue. This characteristic also brings to mind an article by NASA climate scientist Kate Marvel from 2018, who wrote, as a climate scientist, I am often asked to talk about hope. Particularly in the current political climate, audiences want to be told that everything will be all right in the end. Climate change is bleak, the organizers always say. Tell us a happy story. Give us hope. The problem is, I don't have any. She goes on to say, we need courage, not hope. Grief, after all, is the cost of being alive. We are all fated to live lives shot through with sadness and are not worth less for it. Courage is the resolve to do well without the assurance of a happy ending. Barring some planet-killing asteroid or other cosmic event, Earth should continue with or without a human presence for at least a few billion more years. But the world as we know it today is coming to an end whether we like it or not. It's hard to predict how our civilization will adapt to the tribulations ahead. And there are many prominent thinkers who predict that human extinction is near, maybe within a century. Extinction is almost a certain fate for us in the long run, of course, but for the near future, I am a bit more confident in the resilience of human beings. We survived the last ice age and even flourished, spreading out across the planet to inhabit almost every continent and ecosystem. I suspect we can adapt to a warmer, more hostile planet, even though it won't be easy. Future generations will inherit a tumultuous and less hospitable world, largely thanks to our present indifference. Let us pray they have the courage and resolve to endure and adapt, to do well with the assurance, without the assurance of a happy ending. And for us, who now have front row seats to watch the world as we know it begin to unravel, I pray that we can at least use our knowledge and technology to mitigate the worst of the damage as it unfolds. Tragic climate disasters are inevitable, but we can bring comfort and aid to those who are affected. Many species will become extinct before their time, no matter what we do, but others might be saved. The fallacy of perpetual economic growth on a finite planet will eventually come crashing down to Earth. But maybe we can replace our global economic system with something more sustainable and just, guided by the wisdom of nature. Friends, take heart. All is not lost, but the status quo cannot last. And we can never surrender to despair. Michael Dowd writes that those with a post-doom mind and heart haven't given up, they've stood up. Empathy follows naturally in the wake of realizing what is underway and unstoppable. I agree. There is power in accepting the grief and challenges that we face in our lives. And it reminds us of our shared human frailty and our reliance on each other. As the world evolves into an uncertain future, it is my hope that we can transform our grief and despair into action, that we can, as the famous Serenity Prayer says, accept the things we cannot change, have the courage to change the things we can, and have the wisdom to know the difference. I invite you now to rise in body and spirit once again and join in singing our closing hymn, number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning. We have some technical gremlins that every now and then pop up, and we have yet to figure out what's going on. Our closing words are the poem Evening by Dorian Lowe. Moonlight pours down without mercy, no matter how many have perished beneath the trees. The river rolls on. There will always be silence, no matter how long someone has wept against the side of a house, bare forearms pressed to the shingles. Everything ends, even pain, even sorrow. The swan drifts on. Reeds bear the weight of their feathery heads. Pebbles grow smaller, smoother beneath night's rough currents. We walk long distances, carting our bags, our packages, burdens, or gifts.
We will now extinguish our chalice. If you would like to recite your words with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. It is time for our postlude. Be safe and be well. Not heard one way or the other. Let's hope Cindy was saying there was something. Okay, coffee downstairs.